Hello everyone, today I'll be showing you how to tame the Deinosuchus, and we'll be going over each and every single one of its abilities, and we'll be talking and discussing about what makes this the most downloaded mod in Ark Survival Ascended. This thing is an absolute beast, and I'm going to be demonstrating that to you today. Alright, so first let's talk about where you locate them. They should be located in the swamp biome. Technically they share a spawn with the Sarco, so anywhere where you would find a Sarco is where you could find one of these guys, and if you're having a hard time locating them, then I would just go through and essentially kill as many Sarcos as you can, and eventually you should get one to spawn. Now, here's what that looks like on the map. So for the island here on the left, I went through and I mapped it out with the red, and the southern portion right beneath the redwoods leading out to the coast is the primary place you will actually find them. But again, Sarco spawns do happen on other places of the map, so it is possible to find them elsewhere. This is just going to be the most common and the most densely packed areas. And then the same thing for the center there on the right-hand side, basically just surrounding the floating island, and that's going to be the main place for the swamp biome and the spawns for these guys. Now, when it comes time to being able to figure out when this guy's ready to tame, he gives both a physical and an audio cue. So go through and listen to the sound that he makes right now. And then you'll also notice that he opens his mouth very, very largely, so you can pay attention to either one or both. Do know that he does open his mouth very largely when he does his special ability, the Gigabyte, but he will actually typically be moving when he does that. When he's ready to be tamed, he will be sitting idle and kind of just waiting for you to walk up, and then the window will close eventually if you are not fast enough. Now, when you do go through and try and tame him, it is important that you wear the ghillie suit, and also if you have cactus broth, that will be also very helpful, as essentially you just don't want him to detect your presence, because if he does, instead of sitting there waiting to be fed, he will actually make you his next meal. So just be cautious and make sure that he is sitting idle and that he has lost aggro on either you or any other creatures, and make sure you have that suit so yeah, you kind of are hidden from his sight or sense. The biggest challenge you will face when you try to tame him is basically he just aggros onto literally anything and everything. He is extremely aggressive, and because he lives in the swamp area, there are just so many different things for him to eat or that want to pick a fight with him as well. So the biggest challenge here is just getting him to be able to sit still and not have a bunch of wild creatures running around him. So it can be advised to try and just trap him in some sort of area. That way you can just feed him, because then he'll just basically get fed and then immediately just do his same animation and get fed again. He is not like other passive tames like the Basilosaurus, where it takes literally forever for them to just feed again. As soon as he finishes the animation, he can go right back into the next animation as long as he is not aggroed. So it is a pretty quick process, as long as there's nothing to distract him. Now, one last note about the taming is that you don't actually have to be directly in front of him or in his mouth to actually feed him. The safer option and the more consistent option is actually to stand behind his jawline and feed him. And then once you do that, you can easily just run away and reposition and wait for the next feeding. Alright, now let's talk about his abilities. Now, as every other creature does, he does have a basic attack, so just go through and click the right trigger if you're on console, or just the basic attack button if you are on computer, and he will go through and execute a pretty quick bite. Now, the great news about this bite is that even though he does have a pretty wide turn angle similar to that of the Sarco, you can continue to press this bite and almost pull your analog stick or your mouse in a circle, and he will constantly spin and attack. So this is really, really good if you get smaller creatures that are stuck to your side and they refuse to walk away. You can constantly keep jumping at them, similar to the birds you see in the clip behind you now. And you have a really good chance of being able to kill them or catch them off guard, and you're not just stuck not being able to reach them because of your wide turn radius. Alright, now his next ability is his alternative attack, which is a tail swipe. You'll go through and basically swipe targets and knock them backwards. This does go through and actually deal more damage than your standard bite attack does, but you're not able to use it in quick succession. It did seem like there's about a 5-second cooldown in between uses before you can actually use the next one. There will not be an indicator on screen for it. You have to kind of just wait to feel it out, and then when you go to use it again, it should be refreshed and back up. But you can send some of these smaller targets flying, and it's quite funny. But yeah, usually it's used just to create distance if you're low on stam or you're feeling overwhelmed by some small targets. That would be a great thing to go through and use. Now, his last ability is actually his Gigabyte. So this special ability, you go through and you hold the charge, and you can build it all the way up to 100%, and it does this incredibly massive damage, and of course it does stack with the headshot multiplier. But it also goes through and actually inflicts a bleed on the target. So the bleed damage is actually going to be dependent upon how much maximum health the specific target has. So for example, on lower level targets, that number may not be as much, but if you test it on a creature like an alpha, for example, like you see in the background, that number gets significantly higher as they have a much higher base health pool. So it can be very, very effective. Now, this did work on bosses previously. I'm not sure if that'll continue to happen, as I have not tried out against the bosses yet, but that would definitely be something to consider if it does. Also, after doing some testing, I did notice that this Gigabyte has a 15-second cooldown, and you can see that in the indicator in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Now, what's really cool is that even when you are not riding them, they will automatically go through and charge up the powerful bite the moment that is off cooldown. Essentially, what this does is it guarantees the target constantly has a bleed stack on them, and that also is going to go through and ensure that there's maximum damage output being done. And so this is why it was so good against bosses, because you didn't even need to be riding them in order for this powerful bite to be used. They would just automatically charge it up to maximum capacity and go through and dish out massive amounts of damage. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that if you're going through and you're floating on the water and you wish to descend in the water itself, you'll actually need to go through and press the crouch key to go through and descend. And then if you actually rise back up, you could go through and point your camera up to rise up. But if you want to rise quickly, then what you want to go through and do is press in the sprint button. So crouch will go down and sprint will go up. And it kind of looks really funny. If you look at it from the bottom angle here, you can see actually there are actually animations for doing both. So basically he sucks in his stomach when he goes down. And then when he wants to rise back up, he blows out his stomach, filling it with air so he could slowly rise up to the top. So it's really funny when you do it in quick succession, but yeah, that's how you go through and you can swim basically, or, effectively go higher or lower in the water. Now, when it comes to its saddle, you unlock it at level 74, so it's definitely a creature you will not be using in the early game, which makes sense as how powerful it actually is would not really be fair. But for being a late game saddle, it's actually extremely cheap. Now, the kind of weird thing is it looks like the Sarco saddle looks the exact same, but it is in fact for this guy here. And that concludes it for today's guide. If you guys did enjoy today's video, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you're not already.